Hello and welcome to the Jolt Files. My name's Kath Berry and with me I have Patricia Kowal from Acupuncture in Noosa, Australia. Patricia is the author of the free ebook, Regulating Your Digestion with Chinese Medicine. It's with great pleasure that I introduce to you Patricia, who's going to be talking to us about the factors affecting your digestion. So Patricia, my first question for you is, why is it important to project your digestion?
It's incredibly important to project our digestion. It's the center of all of our health. Our energy comes from the quality and the quantity of the food that we take in, and our body's ability to do with that what we will, to make healthy fluids and blood and other usable nutrients.
So could you tell us from a Chinese medicine perspective, what is considered the digestive system?
The digestive system is called the earth, so it's related to the spleen and the stomach organ. This is energetic organs in Chinese medicine, and they're responsible for the transformation and transportation of nutrients and fluids. And so this is the heart of everything, and according to the 5 elements in Chinese medicine, it will therefore affect all the other elements that we need for a balanced health and balanced system.
Could you take us through how it's understood, looking at understanding the inside and outside environments and how that affects our digestion?
In Chinese medicine, we talk a lot about temperature. And this is something that I find Chinese medicine to thrive and to be very unique with, because I find that in Western medicine, they don't necessarily use temperature as diagnostic factors or other ways of looking at the body, whereas we do. So things in nature like heat and cold have certain dynamics that happen in nature, and the same thing are happening in our body. Many years ago, the Chinese system of medicine, all they had to do was observe the outside. That's all they had to figure out what was actually happening inside the body. So they have observed 5 elements, the fire, earth, metal, water, and wood, and 2 in particular, the temperatures, heat and cold. They saw what was happening in nature, and they sorted out that, brilliantly enough, that the same thing was happening inside of our bodies. So cold being very constricting, heat being very moving and very inflammatory. So those things we have a look at to figure out why we're having digestive symptoms, and a lot of times they can fall into either category, and in a more complicated way, sometimes they're in both categories.
Take us through these different factors and how they might affect someone's digestion. What sort of things might somebody experience?
Heat in nature will speed atoms up, and they'll create warmth and inflammation. And so when you're having heat, you may have more drying out. For example, your bowels are dried. They're not releasing because the heat has dried up the fluids, therefore the bowel and the stool aren't moving as well. Another example of heat would be about more of a fire-like symptom, like acid reflux. So you're getting that heartburn kind of presentation, and it's rebelling and going up instead of down through the digestive system. Thirst also. We all know when we're hot, we get thirsty. Maybe we're sweating, losing fluid, so we need to replenish that. Heat can also, again, cause inflammation, so we may get pain, nausea, and things like that.
Understanding if heat does affect the body in this way, what sort of things might cause this heat?
Our diet is huge. What we put in our body creates the atmosphere in our body. And when I look at people and I'm diagnosing people, it's all about sorting out what atmosphere is going on in their body. So if I'm seeing redness on their face, if they tend to be more hot, I can tell that perhaps they've been doing a bit of pungent foods, spicy foods, and thermal foods. So what I mean about thermal drinks and food is things like coffee. It's quite drying and quite thermal, as is alcohol. We all know that alcohol can be quite thermal. It's flammable. Spicy foods, again, too many of them. Some spice is good. It's all about balance. So too much of them over time can accumulate, and you will start seeing factors like this. And a lot of times people don't realize the ramifications of a bit of an imbalance in their diet and too much heat-type foods.
You mentioned spicy food, which we understand. So you mean things with chili or spicy flavour. What does pungent mean?
Pungent is like spicy. We also use the word acrid. So pungency could be, like, some people may not consider ginger to be spicy. but more of a pungent nature. So it's a bit of a slight difference between spicy. So chili sauce, jalapeno peppers, those types of things, definitely spicy. But pungency can be slightly different, again, like the ginger and onion and garlic and that kind of category.
So now looking at other factors, you mentioned heat was one, and you also mentioned cold was another. Could you tell us a little bit about how cold affects the digestion?
Absolutely. Again, have a look in nature. What's cold doing outside? Cold is making water freeze, it's lowering the temperature, it's contracting. And by contracting, I mean if you put water in the freezer, it will turn to ice. There's a contraction in the atoms and they'll form a solid. It's a contraction. So it's also slowing the atoms down. So that means slowing atoms down can mean sluggishness. Contraction could be a disruption in circulation, and lowering the temperature is exactly the way it sounds, actually lowering our body temperature. So these come with different types of symptoms, and it can affect our body in the same way. Just like that dynamic in nature is going to affect inside of our body. So say the slowing down of atoms could be fatigue after eating because our metabolism isn't moving that well. It's sluggish. The coldness, if we say we've ate a salad, a cold dinner, we might be quite tired because our body's really working to metabolize that food because it's quite cold and our body isn't used to that coldness in their body. Same with lack of appetite. It's just not moving as well as it should be, like the circulation through the digestive system and the metabolism. So the food might be making us really full, not wanting to eat anymore. So lack of appetite. And just as heat may have caused pain from inflammation, the cold could as well. So the contraction of the coldness in our digestive system could mean a contraction in the cellular level and just feeling the pain in our abdomen. Also digestively with our bowels, more of a diarrhea or softer stools. It's that cold, in a way, harming the body and harming the digestive system, stomach and spleen, that it's just not forming the way it should, and therefore it's coming out very watery.
And so just like with heat, what sort of foods do you find sort of cause this cold internal condition?
Cold natured foods, and there's two things here. There's cold nature foods and there's actually cold foods like from the refrigerator. So cold drinks, something from the refrigerator directly out with ice in it. We're drinking it. Our body is actually not used to that quick and that type of harsh change in temperature. So it actually reacts and it can contract at the same time. So that over time, I'm not saying on one ice water, you're going to feel a terrible symptom, but over time, the accumulation of the cold can start putting out our digestive fire. It's a bit of a warmth in our digestion that makes the metabolism work, just like a car might work with oil being on the warmer side. Like a car won't work with cold oil. Cars generally don't work well in colder weather. Take it from me, I used to live in very cold weather. So not only cold drinks and things from the refrigerator, frozen foods like ice cream and popsicles, icy poles. And then the other one is things that patients don't usually understand, which is cold-natured foods.
So what's considered a cold-natured food? You've just given us examples there of foods which are cold in temperature, but what do you mean by cold-natured?
And in Chinese medicine, we have a lot of distinctions of the types of foods and what heat and temperature they are related to. So, for example, vegetables, raw vegetables, even if they're not right from the refrigerator, they're still considered on the cold side. And it's a bit of an abstract concept to realize. They're a bit crunchy. It's more difficult to break them down. And it's just considered to be on the cold side. So even sushi, having that cold nature from the sea, fruits have a colder nature to them. So it's not only from the fridge, but it's the inherent quality. And that's one thing I find patients not quite getting when they first come in. And then after we talk about, the big salads actually can be harming your digestion. I'm not saying salads are bad for you, but over time they can actually put out your digestive fire. So that's not a great one to do.
So this is really interesting. I guess what you're saying then is that the theory of Chinese medicine almost contradicts some of the Western medicine ideas we have of eating a fresh bowl of salad, having a fruit salad, having sushi for lunch might in fact be very healthy. But with the idea that it's very cold in nature, perhaps that food over time, if consumed a lot, is not that good. In which case, what would be your advice to someone that's eating what would be considered a very healthy diet, but is at risk of putting out their digestive fire?
That's a great question. I would recommend if you really love your salads and you like sushi, that's fine, I do too. Just not every day and just not all the time. So I tend towards more slightly steamed vegetables for dinner as opposed to the salad, as opposed to raw vegetables on the plate. So slightly steamed things, it's warming it up just enough. You don't even have to cook it that long, just a little bit of heat to break down some of that crunchiness of the veg. If you're having a salad for lunch, I would say have a cup of tea, have something warm immediately after, maybe a few sips with, to kind of go into your stomach and affect the temperature in your stomach as you're eating it. And if you're having, and your acupuncturist or Chinese herbalist is telling you, oh, geez, you have a lot of cold in your body, I may even go as far as to say stay away from the crunchy vegetables and choose your fruits. Obviously, don't have them in the refrigerator. And choose your smoothies if you're making fruit smoothies and juices. Have them, warm them up to room temperature before drinking them. Even though they're cold in nature, if they're not cold directly from the refrigerator, it's probably a bit better than if they were right from the refrigerator or using frozen fruit, for example.
Of course, what you're saying then might come as a shock to a lot of people who, again, feel like they're eating a really healthy diet. But, with this idea that there's cold in temperature as well as cold in nature, what would be an example of someone whose digestive fire had gone out? What sort of symptoms might they be experiencing to know whether that was them or whether they were at risk perhaps of this too much cold food?
Well, it could be so many things. On a digestive level, I would say, like I said before, you could have a tendency towards loose stools and diarrhea, and also having just pain and discomfort after eating. Perhaps could have some bloating. And again, that's food and energy not moving because the cold has contracted into the middle after eating it. So those are one of the major ones. On another level, there could be so many other symptoms. I see a lot of women having a goal for fertility, and their diet, like you said before, they think they're eating quite a healthy diet and they're doing everything they need to do, when in fact they really need to start implementing some of the more warm foods in order to change the temperature in their body.
Wow, so it's obviously the digestion seems to be, from what you're describing, as a bit of the gateway to so many other health consequences, or how you feel generally. Just before, I'd like to move on. You mentioned at the beginning of the podcast about heat, cold, and also damp. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about damp and how too much dampness affects the digestion.
Dampness is another concept that I try to teach patients as soon as they come in. It's a bit of an abstract concept. However, when you start hearing what it means, you get a better idea of what it is. Dampness is, think of it, it's kind of a muckiness, a bit of a muddiness in the body. Some people would say, oh, it's kind of like cholesterol. However, we don't use that word in Chinese medicine, so I cannot say it's the same thing. But it's a bit of a muckiness that may muck up our circulation and make it more sluggish. So, for example, if you had some dampness outside, you feel a little bit sticky on a rainy day, or maybe you're in the humidity. It's quite hot, but it's quite humid, and you have a bit of that sticky feeling. That's a bit of a damp type presentation. And so in Chinese medicine, we actually can accumulate this, I guess I could say, mucus inside of our body. So that, just like the heat and cold have effects in the environment, dampness also does as well.
And you mentioned early dairy foods. Could you describe for us what foods cause this sort of dampness?
Yes, this is very important for, I would have to say the majority of my patients that are coming in for the first time don't understand about damp forming foods. And one of the biggest ones is dairy. Dairy can be quite mucus forming, and if you're talking more in a Western medicine type of way, and in the same way in Chinese medicine, dairy is very damp producing. Again, it's sluggish. It makes you sluggish and it's sticky. And also greasy foods. It's the greasiness of it that can cause a bit of accumulation and mucky, sticky presentation in our circulation.
What would you describe as a greasy food?
Yeah, deep fried potatoes, French fries, chips, greasy type fast food, anything deep fried, more like nachos, all those things that aren't really great to eat. And when we're eating them, we know that's probably not the most healthy for us. It's just really accumulating and not quite healthy. But instead of thinking, oh my gosh, that's not healthy for me, by knowing what it's actually doing inside and how it can accumulate a lot of the stickiness in the body, you may think twice about having too much of it or it at all. Sugar as well. It can be inflammatory. It can also have accumulate this again, I keep using the word accumulation. It can accumulate in the body. So too much sugar will also cause that. Even if you're not doing dairy or greasy foods, the sugar itself can have that same effect.
What would be your advice to people listening today about how to have a healthy, balanced digestion?
Being mindful of those factors, heat, cold, and damp. And really educating yourselves on an intellectual connection about what type of food is in front of us, what quality does it have, and what is it doing in your body. So again, instead of reading a list of no, I can't do dairy, I can't do salad, instead of knowing that you can't do those, think of, oh, this is going to do this to me. I'm already having digestive systems. I'm going to stay away from that dairy because I'm feeling phlegm. It's a phlegm forming. I have mucus in my throat. Those just aren't great for me. So kind of intellectualizing the effects in the body and also protecting your digestion. So our digestion likes like a warm, bland food, which nobody likes to eat that really, because then you'd be eating congee all day. So we don't like to do that. We like to mix up our foods, maintaining a balance in the temperature in our body. So just the right amount of heat, just the right amount of damp. And if you have too much damp, you may have to stay away from that for a while. And also protecting ourselves from the cold. So being mindful of those iced drinks we're getting at the restaurant. Like they put down a very big glass of ice water in front of you with your meal, and that's probably the worst thing you can do following a big meal is just telling your stomach, hey, contract and don't move, don't circulate. So just the right amount of heat, damp, and cold would be a great way to maintain the balance of your digestion.
Terrific. Well, thank you for that. That's obviously food for thought, pardon the pun. You've been listening to Patricia Kowal, who is author of the free ebook, Regulating Your Digestive System with Chinese Medicine. For a copy of the ebook, please go to patriciakowal.com. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of The Jolt Files. See you next time.
I hope you enjoyed this free webinar. Please take a moment to subscribe to our YouTube channel and please share on social media. The world will be a better place when more people know about the benefits of acupuncture.